So when we come to the minors in tarot, we see a lot more of a kind of old versus newer style that certainly took place when we moved away from non-scenic decks of the Marseille tradition. Certainly the Visconti followed that sort of as well. And I know I am not a Marseille expert. I know that I do read Marseille, but I'm not an expert by any means. But there is more here than just counting swords, right? There is things that are going on in progressions and indications and directions and colors. There's a lot of stuff going on that I think that people often who strictly read Rider-Waite-Smith style decks kind of poo-poo about or think that there's not anything there to work with, that it's just 3 swords. That's actually not the case. I think that's a pretty normal misconception around people who maybe have not worked with Marseille at all. But we just certainly have a shift. And again, you know, the Rider-Waite-Smith is often, people will say, I've heard it so many times, you know, that the Rider-Waite-Smith is the first scenic deck, and that simply isn't the case. You know, again, we have the Solla. Let me get the actual time of the Solla Busca. I should have had that, or the date. I should have had that anyways. Oops. Don't mean to do that one. So the Solla Busca deck is considered the oldest deck of 78 cards, but it doesn't really follow our. It has all heroes in the majors. I've gone through it with Otzi. I have, like I said, well, let me just give it, although I don't, this is a bad version. And by bad version, I just mean a lot of the images are distorted and really, really dark. But it is, you know, this, let me find the 3 of hearts, of swords, I mean. Clearly, Pamela Coleman Smith had seen these in the museum. She would have had access to the museum. Some of them are Pippish. But there are scenes that are going on in the minor card, and some of them are taken directly in the Rider-Waite-Smith. But I really wanted to, I know these are all, some of these are upside down. But this, the time period of this, there is actually a reproduction of this coming out this year by Lo Scarabeo, which I'm really excited about. Trying to see the oldest deck. Thank you for not saying how old it is. Nobody's giving me a year. This is when I need 14 maybe? Yeah, 1430s. Perhaps, something like that. So not, you know, completely outside of the realm of this time frame, but it is illustrated. All of the majors are heroes. I really wanted to find, I don't know how I got these all. I must have dropped the deck or something because they're all whopper-jawed. But I really want to show you because, you know, I think that we think about the Rider-Waite-Smith 3 of Swords, even the Wands one. There are actually quite a few, not quite, you know, it's not a ton, but they clearly see, you can see the minor, some of the scenes of the Rider-Waite-Smith here it is. So that that iconographic, that's not the word I'm looking for. The iconic, Kelly cannot talk today. The iconic Three of Swords with the heart with the swords through it. You really do think of that as being sort of this Rider-Waite-Smith thing. But this was back in the 1400s. Like, this came from the Solla Busca. And this is a completely scenic deck. It isn't, exactly, again, because the majors are quite different. There are some that are, you can relate to, but it's not kind of locked into this sort of framework that we see with the Visconti that's continued on. But it is a complete tarot deck, and and it is scenic all the way through. So it's one of my pet peeves. It's one of my pet peeves to hear people say that the Rider-Waite-Smith was the first scenic deck, because that simply isn't true. And even before that, we had the workings for the Picard miners, which is what you see here. Now this, again, this deck was created in 1970 as a celebration of 600 years of tarot in Europe. But and I've got the text as well, and I'm going to be doing a video on this because I have about 3 decks that use this system to show. So that will be coming out, and I'm fascinated. I'm really obsessed with it. I stayed up all night researching and things. But the exact placement of the butterfly, the symbols, the astrological symbols, the egg yolk here with the sun sign in it, all of these things were specifically lined out exactly as they are in the late 1800s, end of the 1800s, early 1900s, and were in place and discussed before the Rider-Waite-Smith. So are these necessarily scenes? No, but there's all kinds of things that are going on here to read with that are not, it's not just 3 swords or 3 pips. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about that, because that gets said a lot. Can we just let go of the fact that the Rider-Waite-Smith is not the first scenic tarot deck? But we definitely see that shift here. And even the Thoth, which is also more accurately the Golden Dawn, has stayed with that same ideology where, yes, we have not people doing things in the deck, but it's very clear through the use of color, through the use of plant life, through the use of just things that are happening within the card. We can get a very clear understanding of what's going on in the card. It's not just pips, like, for example, a playing card where you literally will just have, 5 hearts, and there's nothing else going on. It's on a white piece of paper with 5 hearts. So I think that that's one thing that's also important to point out, that even in decks like the Marseille, there are things that are going on with the plants and the way that they grow and the way that they're in bud and they're in bloom and the different colors and the direction things are moving in. All of those things go into play with giving us information to read with. So simply because there aren't people doing things in there doesn't mean that there aren't any esoteric and or cues to read from. So obviously I'm going to go through these much more quickly because I need to, right? So we can keep moving. But here we have the cups. Absolutely gorgeous, right? Aces are just beautiful. I know that there is quite a difference between in older styles you look to closed cups and open cups, but I am not an expert at that whatsoever. We can see Kabbalah here as well as astrological, and again this is kind of stands between the Marseille and the Rider-Waite-Smith as a really concrete system by Picard. Well, he pulls in a lot of things as well, but he says it's up to us to try to coalesce these things in a smart manner. And this also stands in to show that there was a lot of that discussion of correspondences and, with different systems such as astronomy and Kabbalah and things like that. Lots of that was going on before the Golden Dawn. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say there. Oops, I was going through here. So then we have the 2s, and you can also tell, I think the creator of the Orbifold Tarot is working on a Marseille style deck, and he just did a video I saw recently, sort of an intro to reading with Marseille, and he does talk about how Marseille, because Marseille is a very specific configuration in the actual placement of the items as well as the flourishes and things of that nature, and you can often tell the difference whether or not they're standing on top of each other or the cups are next to each other. So there's a lot of things that are going on. We have Venus here, right? And again, this deck is 1970, but these minor cards were taken really specifically from Eudes, E-U-D-E-S, I don't know how you pronounce that, Picard. And so that's why I'm placing this here. And he includes the symbol of Venus. So we can tell a lot from these two cups together with this wreath of flowers and the symbol of Venus there. Like, that tells us just as much as this tells us, right? So we can even see here this too. We've got the growth coming out of it. There are things that are happening in the various cup cards, even if they don't have people in them. Here we have the Three of Cups. That sort of sense of jubilation that you generally have here, sense of growth that you're going to have in the older decks because they're a little more. I think it's interesting that this one has the middle one laying down. And I'll get into more what these different things are saying. But there's a lot of symbology and discussion of things well before we started to get a lot of scenes going on. And in some ways, the scenes, I think, can sometimes restrict the images even more. Because, for example, even with this, you have that look of boredom. That was a kind of an idea of the idea of boredom that you get with the Four of Cups is not really something that you got in the reading it, if you read it Marseille style. I think not even when you read it with the Picard way of reading the minors, because the number 4 is about stability, which you really do kind of get a feeling a little bit here. And it even is named this luxury in the Thoth Tarot. So where we've kind of locked into sort of the Rider-Waite-Smith of boredom, when you look, this card's not actually as bad as some of the even more modern representations. You don't have any, it instantly hits with that understanding of boredom from the actual image, and it doesn't leave room to be able to read that intuitively, to read that numerically, using the numerology and the suit, which is the number 4 of stability with the suit of emotions. And so sometimes images like that are scenic with people in them can lock the meaning down more so than it needs to be locked down. Makes it easier to read, which I think was the purpose of the weight, was to try to make this easier. But I think in many ways it also then turned in and locked meanings in that didn't necessarily need to be locked in. So I'm going to go through these cups a little quicker now, so you can just kind of see, obviously, but there's a lot of things that are going on, even if there's not a scene going on. And I guess that's one of my main points here. Get to the court cards. I quite like that with all the butterflies. So here, especially with the Thoth, you can really see that sense of, this is indolence, which I don't see the Eight of Cups as at all, which is quite different than we even see with the Rider-Waite-Smith idea of kind of going off on this journey, right? Which is interesting for an 8 if you think numerologically, because again, you have that idea of almost double stability. But if you look at the pips here, you have 5 and 3, so there was some more disruptive energy with the number 5, but it's moving to the 3, which is of growth, so that's sort of moving forward. So I do think that you get that from this, and that's kind of, again, my beat the horse over the head kind of idea. And the 10 of Cups. And then, of course, we get to, oops, no, that was the 9 of Cups. The 10 of Cups. Happily Ever After card. And then we get to the Court cards. And, of course, those remain fairly static with some changes. We have generally pages or valets in the older style decks. And that stays with the, I've got these all, I'm putting them in the wrong piles. That stays with the Rider-Waite-Smith. The Thoth changes it to Princess, as does the Druidcraft. We also sometimes now in the modern decks will see family groupings such as daughter, son, mother, and father as being more relatable units than royalty, which we don't really function with a lot, at least in the many states, and even in countries where there are royal houses. They are often not, you know, what they were at one time. Like they're still, let's say England, you have the royal family, yes, but you still have parliament, you still have a prime minister, and things have shifted a little bit in terms of what that all-invasive ruler, pervasive ruler of sort of an emperor that we don't have as much anymore. And so they've kind of shifted in that way. And then we often have the Knight or the Cavalier or the Princes or sometimes Sons. We have the Queens. I quite like this. This was, oh, that's the Cup one. Never mind. Ignore me. The Queen of Cups. And then we have the Kings of Cups, which the Thoth changes to Knights because he's still in the process of conquering his land, I suppose. And then we have the King here. So that's the Cups, and then I'm going to go a little bit quicker. I'm trying. I got to still flip them all. I was going to split this up into multiple, but I think we can flip through these minors pretty quickly and just kind of stop where we need. Of course, beautiful aces. We early on have that hand kind of coming through that we see here. I love the Druidcraft with the Lady of the Lake. Here we have the Two of Swords. Now this is interesting because this system has swords as water and cups as air, which is really interesting. And again, this is this system, this deck isn't, but the system of minors is pre-Rider-Waite-Smith. So the idea of placing specific elements with these suits obviously came later and was one that was played with. Even now, you will see the swords as fire because they're forged in fire, and you will see the wands as airs. And so that idea of elemental correspondences, everything to do with a correspondence is going to be in flux. Astrological correspondences, Kabbalah correspondences, elemental correspondences, you can find a variety of different answers. You're not going to find this one definitive, this is it, because it's a conversation. It's people working through systems and combining what they know and having this ever-going conversation. It's not something that has just stopped and stayed static in one place in history. It's a conversation that's going on, and that's actually one of the beauties of a system like tarot. So then we have the, of course, Three of Swords, which came from the Solla Busca, which is in the same time period as the Visconti, which I just think is pretty cool. This now in this card system, it's actually supposed to be like this. In this particular deck, she reverses it, which allows that fish to be able to swim away, which I thought was pretty cool. But okay, let's go a little quicker here. Fives. All-seeing eye being shown in there. I mean, there's You know, lots of conversations about the minors because they weren't as locked in as the majors became, as soon as the majors became. And I think that personally, I think that the minors are still somewhat not locked in. There's a lot of room for how do you relate to that number? What element do you relate to it? How do you relate to that element? You know, there's lots of different things that can go into how one might read the numbers. And so often, if you do have people, as I said before, it locks in a specific keyword to that card that that can, as a reader, if you don't generally say read it that way, say as the Ten of Swords, which we'll come to, that can kind of lock you into one specific keyword, which may not be how you particularly relate to that card. And that's one of the benefits of decks that don't have strong scenes in it. You know, if you lay this on the table with a person on the other side of the table, it's really hard to say that this isn't perhaps a depressing card. You know, I'm saying that really locks it into that system. We have the 10, again, sense of completion here, sense of completion in the Suit of Swords, but then we've got, you know, death here, where all of a sudden the completion of the suit of intellect becomes dead people, which is always just, that's, you know, one of the Four of Cups, and the Ten of Swords, or the Three of Cups, no, Four of Cups. Four of Cups and the Ten of Swords are definitely ones that I have issue with more of the Rider-Waite-Smith style. And I always have to explain that away. We're talking about mind and intellect and the end of something that probably needed to come to an end so you can start a new cycle. But it's the completion of its suit, and I really just don't see that as dead people, or with, like with the Wild Unknown, where you've got a poor dead bull. That brings us to the court cards, which again, you know, page, now we have princesses with the Thoth, princesses here, and again, sometimes we'll see daughters. We have the knights. This one, the original, actually has, because the swords is water, actually has the knight trying to ride through water, which is quite interesting. This version changed that up a little bit, but we'll talk about that more with that deck. I love this because this is actually a Visconti who, you know, a woman who, you know, faced people invading army on the castle and kind of rode out to lead the charge, which I love. Wait, I think I have these mixed. Wait, did I get this mixed up? Oh, here. Somehow I skipped. I messed something up there, but we're on the Queens. Love the Queen of Swords, of course. That's my lady. So I love it, and I left that. So hopefully that's the picture I showed when I was telling that. And then we go into the Kings, or the Knight of the Thoth, and then sometimes the Father. And then we shall quickly, and this one might be, I don't know, this one's probably a lot more boring to watch. But you can see there's a lot of stuff going on with the grapes. And again, this was all written down very specifically. Flames below, crossed batons, wheat sheaths, the grapes on the top. You know, that was all put in very specifically. Whoops. Which is fascinating to me. And then we have the Two of Wands. Gets to the threes. But you can see, you know, even though that is, you know, just have 3 wands. Frida Harris used a color, and amazing in the minors. I think one of the things that the Thoth really stands out in the minors is that use of color to really drive home that energy of the card without having to have any people in it. You still get that strong energy of the card. Oops, that was the 3. Oh yeah, now we're on the 4s. 4s, 4s, 4s. A lot of times discord, oops, not, see, I'm doing very bad all of a sudden. There we go, 5s. Often shown as disruptive and fighting. The number 5 is a disruptive number, which you'll see in a lot of the Marseille, where you have the odd numbers as kind of having a slicing through the even numbers, that sort of disruption of the even numbers. Now you can see that sense of there, without there being anything but pips there. I really like how the Thoth kind of kept the structure of the Marseille style decks, but then he's added in symbology, he's added in correspondences, he's added in color and those types of things in a beautiful way. So we have the 7s. I love the inclusion of the elements in that one. The 8s. I really hesitated whether to do the minors, but I thought, you know what, nobody has to watch this. I might as well walk through them. The 9, or going into 10s, the sense of completion. Not sure about how the burden sense got up, although the Solla Busca does show a very, this is one of the ones I think is taken from the Solla Busca. And then, of course, we get to the court cards. Love all the princesses, and again, can sometimes be daughters now, but I love all the princesses in the Druidcraft. The knights, or princes, or sons. The queens. Oops. Boy, am I messing these up. Queens. Queens are sometimes mothers. And the kings. Knights, or sometimes fathers. And then we come to the last suit, almost done. Pentacles. I love the pentacles in the Picard minors. Love it. I can't wait to do the video on this. That is coming this week. I'm just waiting for one deck to come in. So we have the pentacles, which are very earthy, which you can really see. That one seems to be pretty standard across the board. You don't really see the earth ever changing. Generally, the cups and the earth stay the same, and it's the swords and the wands that the element association changes. Although in the Picard, again, you do have a switch with the cups and the swords. I love in Marseille decks, I always look at the 7 of coins, and I always look at the 2 of coins. That's just kind of the one. I love all these astrological associations in the Picard, which again I will talk about on that video. 4, the number of stability. Never liked the miser sense. It's stable resources. I never quite got that whole miserly thing. It's, again, that's the shadow aspect, but why we jumped straight to the shadow, I'm not sure. 5, I love this. It is one of the 5 of Pentacles is in the scenic cards, is one of the ones I also look at. 6. Sevens. That's how I want my 7s to be, which is a Marseille style. I love that the Thoth stayed with that because it's and look, it's all the way back in the Visconti. So that is the idea of the number 4, which is stability, and then the number 3, which is growth. So we have the 7s as being that sort of a movement. It's a growth that's going on, and I love that. And so you can get that without having to have any scenes in it. Which is one of the good examples, I think, of how just because there's not people in a deck doesn't mean that you can't get information going on. 8s. Oh, well, where's the 8s? So now we're doing 9s. 10, or yeah, I think, are we at 10s? Yes, 10s. Lots of symbols going on here. And back to the final court cards with our pages and our princesses and sometimes our daughters, our knights, princes, and sometimes sons, our queens and mothers, and our kings and princes in the Thoth, and our sometimes fathers. So there we have it. Just a quick walkthrough, quickish, I don't know how quick that is, a quick walkthrough of the minors across these decks that we're taking a look at. So I hope that this has been of some degree. Again, this is not intended to be a full-on history lesson. This really, the intention here is just to kind of show both the way that tarot has remained relatively intact and stable from the 1450s all the way through to the modern day, and also some of the ways in which it stays fluid, and some of the ways that I think one of my points is that I think that it should stay fluid. I think that religion and esoteric studies and spiritual things are one of the benefits is, I don't know what I did to my Thoth, mixed something up here. One of the important things is that it stays fluid, that the conversation stays ongoing. Otherwise, it will go stagnant, and I think that you lose momentum with it. And so I think it's important that we respect the modern deck creators who are attempting to put their voice in. I also do think, though, that we require, one of the things with the boom of tarot decks, right, and there's a huge boom of tarot decks, I think that we also, while I think as collectors and purchasers of tarot decks that we need to give artists room to have that conversation, which we see in sort of the combination of decks, which we've seen all along. There's always been that sharing from other systems and that combining, and how does it look if we do this, and how that conversation is part of the history of tarot. And so I think that we need to allow modern decks to still be able to have that conversation, right? And still be trying to have that conversation with their decks, like you'll see with the Marielle pulling in different aspects of although I consider that to be more heavily Thoth, but where you have that conversations of change. But at the same time, I think that so that's, I think, the responsibility on the purchasers of decks and the purveyors and those of us having this conversation with the decks, that we allow artists to have that conversation. But I think it also puts responsibility on the artists, that there are groupings of decks that I think are created just because an artist decides to make a tarot deck that doesn't really have any understanding of tarot, and I think you can quickly see that. So I think it is on the responsibility of a good tarot artist, right, to be actually having a conversation and to be mindfully making the changes in the conversation that it's having, because I think that sometimes people can pick up a deck that isn't necessarily steeped in somebody's tarot journey, but is just simply an artist interpretation of the cards, and that can be a kind of a confusing place to start the journey of tarot, because that if they don't even have the kind of the traditional foundations. And that's why I'm always one of those people that in many different ways say that understand foundations, and then you have room to have the conversation. And so, you know, I think when we're seriously spending a lifetime working with tarot, it's also on us to kind of put that work into understanding the tradition and understanding where it all comes from, so that just gives us an even wider platform for our intuition to jump from, right? Okay, I'm going to stop rambling. Thank you for walking through this with me, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. I will be doing a walkthrough of this deck here. I still have to do a walkthrough of the CBD, and I have a combination, really a discussion of the Picard minors that I'm going to be doing a video on as well. So those are kind of the ones that I have coming up. So talk to you soon.